Welcome to the Greg's Review Show today. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic that's affecting our community, and particularly our churches and what's going on in the church. We need to expose these pastors that are living double lives. So please help support us through Cash App. That's GRC $mantrap. $1.50. Any donation will be greatly appreciated. Thumbs up, like and share this video. We're going to go ahead and get this video cranked up, and I'll be back to talk about this video. Here we go, family. Let's do it.
Was a place where tradition and faith intertwined, and nowhere was this more evident than in the Belhaven neighborhood. At the center of this community stood Pastor Samuel Bennett, a man who had spent over 2 decades cultivating his reputation as a beacon of morality and spiritual guidance. At 46 years old, Pastor Bennett was known for his powerful sermons that could move even the most hardened hearts. His church, Mount Zion Baptist, was more than a place of worship. It was a cornerstone of the community, drawing in hundreds of congregants every Sunday. Pastor Bennett's life appeared to be one of fulfillment. He lived in a stately home just a few blocks from the church with his wife, Grace, a woman of quiet strength and unwavering faith. Together, they had raised 2 children, now teenagers, who were the pride of the Bennett family. To his congregation, Samuel was more than a pastor. He was a symbol of what a godly man should be: disciplined, compassionate, and above reproach. Yet behind the closed doors of his study, Samuel Bennett wrestled with demons that few could imagine. The pressures of leadership, the weight of expectation, and the monotony of a life lived in the public eye had begun to wear on him. It was during this time of internal struggle that Jordan Mitchell entered his life. Jordan was a 23-year-old college student who had recently moved to Jackson to attend a nearby university. Handsome, charismatic, and full of life, Jordan was immediately noticed by many in the congregation, including Pastor Bennett. He started attending Mount Zion Baptist regularly, quickly becoming involved in various church activities. He was eager to learn, often staying after services to speak with Pastor Bennett about the day's sermon or seek advice on personal matters.
Here in Michigan, we have an important election for president and for U.S. Senate. This election will decide the future of our democracy.
What began as routine pastoral care soon evolved into something more. Samuel found himself drawn to Jordan in ways that he struggled to understand, let alone accept. Jordan, for his part, admired Samuel's wisdom and authority, but he also sensed something more beneath the pastor's carefully controlled exterior. Their meetings became more frequent, often extending late into the evening, long after the rest of the church had emptied. During these sessions, a bond formed that went beyond the usual pastor-parishioner relationship. Samuel began to confide in Jordan, sharing thoughts and feelings he had never expressed to anyone, not even his wife. Jordan, in turn, revealed his own struggles, his uncertainty about his future, his complicated relationships, and his deep need for acceptance. As the weeks passed, the nature of their relationship shifted imperceptibly, but undeniably. There were lingering touches, glances that lasted a moment too long, and a growing tension that neither could ignore. The lines between spiritual guidance and personal desire began to blur, and both men found themselves caught in a web of forbidden emotions. Pastor Bennett was acutely aware of the danger. He knew that what was developing between him and Jordan was not just morally wrong, but could also destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. Yet the allure of the forbidden was too powerful to resist. In Jordan, he saw a chance to escape the confines of his life, to experience a passion that had long been absent from his marriage. By the end of the summer, what had started as innocent mentorship had grown into a full-fledged emotional and physical affair. The 2 men met in secret, hiding their relationship from the prying eyes of the community, and most importantly, from Grace. Every meeting was fraught with tension and excitement, a dangerous dance on the edge of ruin. Pastor Bennett knew that he was playing with fire, but he convinced himself that he could control the situation, that he could have both his public life and his private desires. He didn't realize that the seeds of his downfall had already been sown, and that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down around him. By the fall of 2013, the affair between Pastors Samuel Bennett and Jordan Mitchell had deepened into a dangerous and intoxicating secret. Their relationship, forged in the shadows, was a stark contrast to the pastor's public life, where he continued to present himself as a paragon of virtue. The thrill of the forbidden only heightened their passion, but it also magnified the risks they were taking. The affair was conducted with meticulous care, as both men understood the catastrophic consequences of discovery. They often met late at night in secluded spots around Jackson, Mississippi, places where they were unlikely to be recognized. One of their frequent rendezvous points was a quiet park on the outskirts of the city, where they would sit in Samuel's car, talking in hushed tones, their hands occasionally brushing, sending electric jolts through both of them. These moments were a blend of anxiety and desire, each encounter a calculated risk that both thrilled and terrified them. Samuel was acutely aware of the duplicity in his life. By day, he stood in the pulpit, delivering sermons on morality, faithfulness, and the dangers of temptation. By night, he succumbed to those very temptations, unable to resist the pull he felt towards Jordan. The contradiction gnawed at him, but the passion he felt in Jordan's presence was something he hadn't experienced in years. It was an escape from the pressures of his public life, a release from the expectations that had been placed upon him as a spiritual leader. Their affair wasn't just about physical attraction, it was a complex web of emotions. Samuel found in Jordan a confidant, someone with whom he could share his doubts and fears, someone who didn't see him as the untouchable figure he was to his congregation. Jordan, on the other hand, was drawn to the power and authority that Samuel embodied. Being involved with such a prominent figure made him feel important, even invincible. But as their relationship deepened, so did Jordan's feelings of resentment. He couldn't shake the sense that he was being used, that Samuel's interest in him was purely self-serving, a way for the pastor to satisfy his own desires while maintaining his carefully crafted image. Despite the growing tension, neither man was willing to end the affair. Samuel feared the emptiness that would return if he severed ties with Jordan, while Jordan enjoyed the status and influence that came with being close to such a powerful figure. Their meetings continued, each one more fraught with danger as the affair became harder to conceal. As winter approached, the pressure on Samuel began to mount. The weight of his double life was becoming unbearable, and the constant fear of exposure gnawed at him. He knew that if their secret were to come out, it would destroy not only his career, but his family and reputation as well. Yet the very thought of giving up Jordan was equally unbearable. The affair had become an addiction, a compulsion he couldn't shake, despite the risks. Jordan, too, felt the strain. The initial excitement of their relationship had begun to wear thin, replaced by a growing bitterness. He felt trapped in a situation where he held little power, dependent on the whims of a man who preached virtue by day and succumbed to vice by night. The imbalance of their relationship became more apparent with each passing day, and Jordan's resentment simmered just below the surface, threatening to erupt. Their secret affair was spiraling out of control, with both men aware that they were playing with fire. The line between love and manipulation blurred, and the stakes grew higher with each clandestine meeting. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, Samuel and Jordan found themselves on the precipice of a disaster that neither of them could fully comprehend. The affair that had begun as a thrilling escape now loomed as a potential catastrophe, one that could bring their entire world crashing down around them. In early 2014, the carefully concealed affair between Pastor Samuel Bennett and Jordan Mitchell took a perilous turn when an anonymous tip arrived on the desk of Deacon Harold Thompson, one of the most trusted leaders at the Greater Faith Baptist Church. The note, typed and unsigned, was brief but damning. Your pastor is not the man you think he is. He's involved in a relationship that will destroy this church if the truth comes out. Initially, Deacon Thompson dismissed the tip as a baseless rumor. Pastor Bennett had been a guiding force in the church for years, and the idea that he could be involved in something scandalous seemed preposterous. However, the unsettling nature of the accusation lingered in his mind, and Thompson, a man known for his meticulous nature, felt compelled to look into it further. Thompson began his investigation quietly, careful not to arouse suspicion. He started by reviewing phone records that he had discreetly obtained through a contact in the local phone company. What he found shocked him. There were numerous late-night calls between Pastor Bennett and a number registered to Jordan Mitchell, a young man who had recently joined the congregation. The frequency and timing of the calls raised red flags, as they often occurred well after midnight, long after any church-related business would have been conducted. Worried, but still not completely convinced, Thompson decided to dig deeper. He began to observe the pastor more closely, noting his comings and goings. Thompson's worst fears were soon confirmed. One evening, Thompson followed him unnoticed and was stunned to see the pastor meeting Jordan Mitchell in a secluded parking lot away from the church. Thompson's heart sank as he watched the two men embrace, their interactions far too intimate to be mistaken for anything innocent. He continued his surveillance over the following weeks, gathering more evidence, photographs of their secret meetings, records of hotel stays that corresponded with the pastor's unexplained absences, and testimonies from a few church members who had noticed Samuel and Jordan's suspicious behavior. The deacon's discovery sent shockwaves through him. As a man deeply committed to his faith and the well-being of his church, Thompson was torn between loyalty to his pastor and the undeniable truth of what he had uncovered. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on him, knowing that if the affair were exposed, it could bring the church to its knees, shattering the congregation's trust and potentially leading to a mass exodus of members. Thompson considered confronting Pastor Bennett directly, hoping to handle the matter discreetly and perhaps guide the pastor back to the path of righteousness. But as he wrestled with his conscience, the rumor mill within the church began to churn. Whispers of the pastor's inappropriate behavior started circulating among the church leaders, fueled by the subtle changes in Pastor Bennett's demeanor and the increasing distance between him and his wife, who had also begun to sense that something was amiss. The situation grew more precarious with each passing day. The deacon knew that he couldn't keep the truth hidden forever, but he also feared the repercussions of exposing such a scandal. The reputation of Greater Faith Baptist Church, built over decades, was now on the brink of collapse. As Thompson deliberated on his next move, the tension within the church community escalated, setting the stage for a confrontation that would soon shake the very foundations of their faith. But
he thinks your private medical decisions should be up to him, Mike Rogers said.
As the prime suspect in Jordan's disappearance, Detective Morgan knew she needed more than just circumstantial evidence to make an arrest, so she pushed harder, re-interviewing witnesses and scouring the pastor's digital footprint. In the course of her investigation, she uncovered more text messages, this time from a secondary phone that Jordan had used to communicate with the pastor. These messages were explicit, detailing not only their relationship, but also the growing tension as Jordan pressured Bennett for more money. The messages painted a picture of a man feeling trapped and desperate, and another man losing control of the situation. With the evidence in hand, Detective Morgan obtained a search warrant for the pastor's home and office. The search yielded more incriminating evidence, including a journal in which Pastor Bennett had written about his guilt and fear of losing everything. The entries, though vague, hinted at actions taken in desperation and spoke of a burden that was too heavy to bear. The arrest of Pastor Samuel Bennett on December 2nd, 2014, sent shockwaves through the community. News of his involvement in Jordan Mitchell's disappearance and the affair that preceded it dominated local headlines. The media swarmed the courthouse as Bennett was taken into custody, his face a mixture of resignation and fear. The community that had once revered him now found itself grappling with disbelief and betrayal. How could their spiritual leader, a man they had trusted with their souls, be capable of such deceit? The church, once a sanctuary, became the epicenter of a scandal that rocked Jackson to its core. As Pastor Bennett sat in a holding cell, awaiting the charges that would soon be brought against him, the full extent of his double life began to emerge. The evidence was damning, and the truth was undeniable. The man who had preached righteousness and virtue had been living a lie, one that had cost an innocent man his life. The investigation, though far from over, had laid bare the dark secrets that Pastor Bennett had fought so hard to conceal. Now, with the weight of the law pressing down on him, the pastor would have to face the consequences of his actions in a court of law, with the eyes of the entire community watching. The trial of Pastor Samuel Bennett began on February 16th, 2015, in the Hinds County Courthouse in Jackson, Mississippi. The case had drawn national attention, with media outlets from across the country descending on the small southern city to cover the proceedings. The courtroom was packed with spectators, including members of Bennett's congregation, curious onlookers, and journalists eager to report every detail of the case. The trial was poised to be one of the most sensational in Mississippi's recent history, given the high-profile nature of the defendant and the shocking allegations against him. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Karen Jackson, presented a meticulously detailed case against Pastor Bennett. Jackson, known for her no-nonsense approach and sharp legal mind, outlined the evidence in her opening statement, describing the affair between Bennett and Jordan Mitchell as the catalyst for a chain of events that culminated in murder. The prosecution argued that Bennett, a man of God who was supposed to uphold moral integrity, had instead been living a double life, driven by lust, fear, and ultimately desperation. The evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors presented text messages between Bennett and Jordan, financial records showing the payments made to Jordan, and testimonies from church members who had noticed the secretive behavior. The most damning piece of evidence was a journal found in Bennett's office, where he had written about his fears of exposure and the lengths he would go to protect his reputation. The prosecution called a series of witnesses, including Jordan's family, who spoke of their anguish and the sudden change in Jordan's behavior after he became involved with Bennett. Key testimony came from Detective Lisa Morgan, the lead investigator in the case. She walked the jury through the timeline of events leading up to Jordan's disappearance, the discovery of the financial transactions, and the subsequent arrest of Pastor Bennett. Morgan's testimony was clear, concise, and left little doubt about Bennett's guilt. She recounted the night of the murder, piecing together how Bennett had lured Jordan to a remote location under the guise of a final payment, and then, in a fit of panic and fear, killed him to silence the threat. The defense, led by attorney Richard Malone, faced an uphill battle. Malone tried to portray Bennett as a man under extreme pressure, arguing that he acted in self-defense when Jordan became aggressive during their final meeting. However, the lack of evidence to support this claim made it difficult to convince the jury. The defense also attempted to discredit the prosecution's witnesses, but their efforts were largely unsuccessful. The testimonies of church members, who described Bennett's increasingly erratic behavior in the months leading up to the murder, only served to strengthen the prosecution's case. Throughout the trial, Bennett's demeanor was one of stoic resignation. He rarely made eye contact with the jury and spent much of the trial staring at the floor. His wife, seated behind him in the courtroom, was a constant presence, her face a mask of anguish as the sordid details of her husband's double life were laid bare for all to see. The once revered pastor, who had stood at the pulpit and preached about righteousness and virtue, was now exposed as a man who had succumbed to his darkest desires. The trial lasted for 3 weeks, and on March 10, 2015, the jury retired to deliberate. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as everyone waited for the verdict. After only 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. Pastor Samuel Bennett was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with a collective gasp from the spectators, followed by silence as the weight of the decision sank in. Bennett showed little reaction as the verdict was read, his expression blank. However, his wife broke down in tears, her sobs echoing in the otherwise silent courtroom. The judge, recognizing the gravity of the crime, sentenced Bennett to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence ensured that the once revered pastor would spend the rest of his life behind bars, paying for the life he had taken and the trust he had shattered. The aftermath of the trial left the community reeling. The church that Bennett had led was fractured, with many members leaving in the wake of the scandal. The congregation was left to pick up the pieces, their faith in their leader, and in some cases their faith in God, deeply shaken. The story of Pastor Bennett became a cautionary tale, a grim reminder of how power, secrecy, and unchecked desire could lead to the most tragic of downfalls.
Fair use on this video. Like I said, it's just amazing how we find out that some of these pastors, how they live double lives, and it's a shame. And the Lord is just bringing this stuff to fruition. And God is not mocked. Whatsoever man soweth, that shall he reap. And so I just thought I'll bring this video. Thumbs up, like and share this video. If someone needs to hear this video, please help support us through Cash App. That's GRC $mantrap. Any donation, 50 cents, a dollar, any donation will be greatly appreciated. And thank you for tuning in to the Greg's Review Show. And if the Lord say the same, I'll definitely be back here next week with a wonderful, wonderful topic. Bye bye.